Hello everybody and welcome back to the race recap. On today's episode of the race recap, we are going to be talking about Silverstone with a special guest,
Matthew. Yay!
Okay, in today's episode, we are going to be doing it a little bit less formal. We're going to be doing it just a straight chat, so let's get ready. Right, okay. Starting this race, Matthew and Rory had 5 place grid penalties from incidents in Austria on about lap 15, you'd say, yeah?
Yeah, it was pretty devious Austria race. I made a minor miscalculation and may or may not have hit Rory off of the track, and I think he says he doesn't, but I think he was a little bit annoyed at me and he hit me. So that resulted in 5 place grid penalties.
Now getting into quali, so Joshua had also retired, and what was your thoughts on Joshua's retirement?
When did Joshua retire again?
He retired, I think it was 2 days after Austria. He decided to pack it up from the sport and become a commentator and the head of FIA, which has now introduced time penalties into the sport.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Joshua's retirement. It was unexpected. To be fair, he wasn't making the biggest impact in the sport, so it didn't affect me much. If someone like Rory was to retire, that would be devastating news, and I'd be very sad.
And speaking of Rory came into this Grand Prix with a 40-point championship lead on second place Lewis. What do you think he's going to win the championship?
I personally still think he will win the championship, as he is a much more skilled driver in my personal opinion. Much more consistent, less violent driver. And he's also not as biased towards himself. He doesn't glaze himself.
Who's that? Okay, back to quali. So Lewis went out first and he set a flyer, a steamer. It actually wasn't that good. It was about 5 tenths off the pace, but he was in first place. Lewis was out on track and he ended up binning pretty much everyone, including Lewis in that lap, but he didn't get that much damage. So
yeah, I think with the subject of Lewis, I think he'll probably end up being disqualified from the championship, as he's an incredibly dirty driver, and I don't believe he has a place in this sport.
I do actually kind of agree with this. I mean, he hasn't been racing at his finest so far. I mean, 2 races, 2 DNFs, actually 3 races. First one he didn't even turn up, and then 2 races, 2 DNFs after that. So not looking good from the young Ferrari rookie. Right, moving on. So Brody was getting annoyed at Lewis, and Rory was caught in the havoc of all this.
Yeah, Rory, I think, made a slight miscalculation when he was accelerating out of, was it Maggots and Beckett's?
I think it was, yeah.
And he spun, ended up backwards and reversed, getting him disqualified from qualifying, which was not a great start for him, but he kind of improved himself in the race with exceptional wet weather driving.
Yeah, I mean, it was not his finest qualities. The man had about 5 poles in a row at the start of the season. He looked like everyone's favourite, but then we moved into this qualifying and it just wasn't looking good for him. Matthew, moving on to him while he's here. What was your thoughts on his performance during quali?
I think my performance was pretty adequate, with little to no practice before this and my first race using manual gearbox. I think I did quite well, qualifying P2 with my 5 place grid penalty. That was, I think, poor decision making for me on the last part in Austria.
Yeah, Lewis as well, he ended up setting a faster lap by 5 tenths on mediums, and then he improved by about 800s on softs. So he ended up on pole. Now moving on to Brody, he did not have his finest qualifying. He felt like he was doing okay, but he only ended up 5th with 2 AI drivers in front of him. His qualifying was pretty adequate, not exceptional. It looked like he was wrestling the car a little bit. What was your thoughts on his performance?
Yeah, I think Silverstone especially is a challenging track, with little to no performance going into this, little to no practice. I mean, he underperformed, especially against the artificial intelligence drivers, and he underperformed in his car.
Yeah, very bad performance by him. So, finishing orders from the quali was Lewis P1, Matthew P7 after a 5 points grid penalty, obviously, so he actually ended up qualifying P2. Brody had 5th place, but he ended up moving up to 4th after Matthew dropping down. We had Lewis in 18th place because of his havoc, and Rory in 19th after his reversing through Maggots and Beckett's. Now moving on to the race, we had to do a quick restart, but we did keep it in the same weather conditions, which was wet for the first time ever on an actual race in the ZNI F1 Championship. It was a bit of a rough start with a virtual safety car coming out by turn 3. What was your thoughts on it, Matthew?
Just going to backtrack a bit here. Turn 1, I made a dive down the inside with, I believe it was a small glitch in the game, and it destroyed my front wing slightly, which was not particularly good, which led to make some poor choices with my pit strategy. But the VSC lap 3, I think it was just, again, poor decision making from Brody and Piastri. Bad incident. Just unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few overtakes at the start, but it's extremely hard for a full throttle turn 1 corner, and it was wet. It was inter-compound tyres because of the wet track. So a virtual safety car was inevitable. Go a lap forward, virtual safety car was just about to end on lap 1 when the actual safety car ended up coming up. Do you know why that was for, Matthew?
I believe that was for Lewis. I think he made a small miscalculation in his driving and ended up retiring. Again, poor driving on his part. I think he should be disqualified from either the next race or the whole championship altogether.
Yeah, not looking good for him. So, going forward to about lap 4, I think Matthew and Rory ended up pitting, and it was so they were back in 15th and Rory was in 18th, I believe. Lewis in 1st, Brody in 3rd with a close incident with Antonelli. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It was less of a close incident. From my point of view, looking at the car, I seen Brody taking a very tight line into the corner, with Antonelli taking the more traditional racing line. And Brody ended up, from my point of view, driving into the side of Antonelli, with him calling for that to be a penalty for Antonelli. After some investigation, I believe it will be a penalty for Brody.
Yeah, it does not look good for Brody here in this situation. We have a quick video to show you, so we're just going to put that one up on screen now.
Safety cars out. Keep an eye on the delta. We need to keep it positive to avoid a penalty. Slow down, maintain positive delta.
Back onto some safety car talk. Matthew has a few words on his error in his pit stop early on, when a mandatory pit stop was not necessary in this Grand Prix.
As I said before, I had some minor front wing damage from a collision with Lance Stroll. I ended up pitting, which I don't believe was necessary, and that messed up my strategy, as I didn't think that we would end up having to pit again for dry tyres. Again, I also had a small miscommunication with my teammate Roy. I did not tell him that I was going to be pitting, and he did not tell me that he was going to be pitting. So I ended up making a mistaken double stack. Apologies for that stutter there. The double stack, and that lost Roy a significant amount of time, pushing him down to last place.
Yep. Now, about lap 5, we ended up getting back underway. A lot of argument in the paddock and on the grid from Brody's incident and the double stacking from Matthew. However, we move on from that and we get lights out once again. Upon the restart, Lewis launched off from first. However, he left Matthew and Roy in a peculiar position. You know, I'm just not even going to say that word anymore. Peculiar. Why did I try again? He left them in a bad position, and so they were in the middle of a corner. Can you explain a bit more in detail about that?
Yeah, me and Rory were stuck in a peculiar position at the end.
Has to flex.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was on the final corners, and the incredibly slow, almost hairpin-like turn right at the end, right before the corner exit. It was, I believe, Gabriel Bartoletto and no, it was Oliver Behrman in front of me, and he got a much better restart, pushing away much quicker, and it led to me and him losing maybe 2 or 3 seconds on that exit and the restart.
Lewis at the front of the pack was closely followed by George Russell, with Brody about 8 seconds behind, just lacking that pace in third place. However, he was currently on for a podium at that point. But then we get onto about lap 8, and race engineers started getting on the radio and saying, you need to pit this lap if you want to have a good race. And that is exactly what every driver on the grid did, apart from Brody. And did you?
I did.
Yeah, everyone
I was
apart
the
from
first one
Brody.
to make that decision.
Good pit stops from the crew that had pitted, which
Good pit stops for the crew that had pitted.
it's getting mocked by my peer right now. Anyway, good pit stops came out. I think Lewis was P9 after 8 people had not pitted, and Brody quickly realised that his pit stop window and race strategy was not good.
This was where I realised that I had messed up previously with my early pit stop under safety car. Yeah, it was poor from me and the team, mostly just me though, because I had called for an early pit stop. But yeah, it was pretty terrible strategy, which I believe that's what led to me and Rory finishing in low and outside the points.
Yep. We apologise for any bad podcasting right now, because this is our first duo podcast together, and we are trying to do it off the top of our heads. Okay, going to lap 9, Brody ends up pitting and ends up in about 11th place. 3 cars decide not to pit for the rest of the race and just go on a 0 pit stop strategy, which may have worked in their favour. It was Lance Stroll, Esteban Ocon, and I'm not sure which other driver it was. But 2 of them actually ended up on the podium, so it was actually a good race strategy. However, so was the softs. From Rory's good pit stop, he ended up coming out in 11th place, but then after the others pitted on lap 9, he actually made it to 6th. However, later on in the race, he had a large incident with George Russell dive bombing and ended up with a 23-second penalty, which eventually put him out of the points and below Matthew, who ended up finishing in 16th, 15th?
14th.
14th. As for Brody, he didn't have a much better time either, and I believe he ended up crashing, or he just didn't perform at his standard, and he finished quite low down as well.
May I add something? Here, it was... I think it was on the dry tyres, I made a late lunge on the Hulkenberg, and ended up hitting the curb. Oh, rapping. And and got extreme front wing damage. Well, not extreme, but pretty severe on a track that is so front wing dependent on like Silverstone with the high speed corners such as Maggots and Beckett's. I consistently went off track, which eventually led to me getting overtaken and losing many positions.
So at the end of the race, it ended up being only one human driver in the points for the first time ever, with the main man on the top step, Lewis, bagging home 25 points, and actually 26 points because he also ended up getting fastest lap on the final lap by about 2 seconds. A brilliant performance from the Brit driver. As for the Drivers' Championship, at the end of this Silverstone Grand Prix, Not much shuffling from the grid. In fact, there was no shuffling. However, Lewis did end up gaining 26 points on Roy, meaning he is now just 14 points behind in a championship where Roy looks certain to win. About halfway through the season, the Constructors is shaping itself up nicely, with Red Bull on the top step, followed by Alpine. A 55 point gap between the top two, and then about 150 points back in third place is Mercedes, with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, which used to have Josh is racing for them. So, that is it for the race recap. Matthew, you happy?
Thank you for having me. That was a great podcast and terrible race for me. I would love to come back on this podcast. Again, thank you for having me.
You're a brilliant guest, and I'm sure the guests will love having you, the fans. Well, this is over now, but we will see you next week for Spa-Francorchamps, whatever it's called.
Spa-Francorchamps.
On a sprint weekend. It's going to be a lot of editing for me. See you later.
Bye.